The night was cold and the streets were empty. Two alien sisters walked slowly, their feet dragging against the broken ground. Their clothes were torn, their skin pale from hunger, and their eyes filled with sadness. The older sister held the younger one's hand tightly, afraid that if she let go, she would lose her forever. The city around them was silent. Only the sound of the wind passed through the ruined buildings. The tall towers once shone with bright lights, but now they were only shadows, standing like broken teeth against the dark sky. The younger girl's stomach growled. She pressed her hands against it, whispering that she was fine, but her steps grew weaker. The older one looked around desperately, hoping to find food or shelter, but all she saw were closed doors and dark windows. They had been walking since the morning, begging for help from strangers, but everyone pushed them away. Some threw stones, others shouted at them to leave, calling them worthless. The girls had learned to stay quiet, to keep walking, but each rejection cut their hearts like knives. The younger sister's legs trembled, and suddenly she fell to her knees, breathing heavily. The older one knelt beside her, shaking her shoulder, whispering her name with fear. "Get up, please. We cannot. Stop here," she begged, but the younger girl did not answer. Her small face was pale, her lips dry, her eyes half closed as if the world was fading away. The older sister hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face, her heart beating fast. She looked around the street, but there was no one. Only the echo of her cries returned to her. For a moment she thought this was the end. Her sister would die here on this empty street, and she would be left alone. The thought made her chest hurt more than hunger ever did. She buried her face into her sister's shoulder, whispering that she was sorry, that she had failed her. Then suddenly she heard footsteps, slow and steady, coming from behind. Her body froze, her breath caught in her throat. She looked back, her eyes wide with fear. A shadow moved in the distance, tall and strong, growing larger with each step. The older sister pulled her sibling close, shielding her with her body, her heart racing like a trapped bird. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling, but the footsteps did not stop. The shadow came closer, and in the faint light of the broken street lamp, she saw a figure. It was a human man, his clothes worn from travel, his face tired, but his eyes sharp and alert. The girl's fear grew stronger, for she had heard many stories of humans. Some said they were cruel, some said they were kind, but she had only known cruelty. Her hands shook as she tried to wake her sister, whispering for her to get up. But the girl remained weak in her arms. The human stopped a few steps away, his eyes falling on the two alien girls. The older one stared back, ready to fight even though she had no strength left. The silence between them was heavy. Only the wind moved, carrying dust across the road. Finally the man spoke, his voice deep but calm. "Is she hurt?" he asked, pointing to the younger sister. The girl did not answer. She only tightened her grip, shaking her head in fear. The man did not move closer. He stayed where he was, watching them with careful eyes. Then he slowly reached into his bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the ground between them and stepped back. The smell of bread drifted through the air, warm and soft, making the older girl's stomach twist with hunger. Her eyes locked on the bread, her throat dry, but she did not move. She feared it might be a trick. She feared the man's kindness might hide danger. The human did not force her. He simply stood there, his eyes gentle but steady. The younger sister stirred in her arms, whispering faintly, "Food," her voice so weak it almost broke. The older girl looked at her sister, then at the bread, her heart in a storm. Trusting a stranger could mean safety, or it could mean the end. Her body trembled as she thought of what to do. The man spoke again, softer this time. "She needs it more." "Then you fear me." The words hit her like a weight, because they were true. Her sister's breath was shallow, her body weak. One wrong choice could take her away forever. The girl reached out slowly, her hand shaking. She grabbed the bread and held it close. Still watching the human with cautious eyes, he did not move. He did not smile. He only nodded as if to say it was all right. The older sister tore a piece and pressed it gently to her sibling's lips. The younger girl chewed weakly, her eyes fluttering open, life returning little by little. The older sister's tears fell again, but this time they were mixed with relief. She looked up at the human, her fear still alive, but now joined with a question. Why was he helping? Why did he stop? Why did he care? The empty street held its breath as if waiting for the answer. The older alien sister held her weak sibling close, her eyes never leaving the human standing a few steps away. He was silent, as if waiting for her to decide whether he was danger or hope. The bread had saved her sister's life for the moment, but fear still ruled her heart. She had seen kindness turn to cruelty before. She knew promises could break like glass. The human man adjusted the strap of his bag, his face tired but steady. He did not look like a soldier or a rich traveler, more like a wanderer who had walked too many miles. His boots were covered in dust, his jacket patched in places, his hands rough and scarred, but his eyes carried something she did not expect. Gentleness, the kind that was rare in a cold world. "Do you have a place to go?" he asked softly, his voice breaking the silence. The older girl tightened her arms around her sister, shaking her head slowly. She wanted to shout at him, to tell him to leave them alone, but no words came out. Her throat was dry, her fear heavy, her heart torn between caution and desperate. "Eat." The man crouched down, lowering himself to her level, though he kept a safe distance. "I don't mean harm," he said, "but if you stay here, she will not survive the night." His words stabbed into her like a blade, because deep down she knew they were true. The younger sister's breathing was shallow, her skin too pale, her small body trembling in her arms. The night air grew colder and frost began to form on the broken stones of the street. The older sister finally spoke, her voice shaking. Why are you helping us?" The man looked at her quietly for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he answered in a low voice. "Because I once watched someone I loved suffer the same way, and no one helped." His words were simple, but the pain in his tone was real and she could feel it. She searched his face looking for lies, but saw only truth written in his tired eyes. Still, doubt clung to her heart. She whispered again, "Humans. They hurt us, they hate us." The man sighed, his gaze falling to the ground for a moment. "Some do," he admitted, "but not all, not me." He glanced at the younger sister, then back at her. "I don't want anything from you, only to see her live." The older sister held her silence, her mind fighting itself. Trusting him could mean safety, but it could also mean falling into a trap. She had been abandoned once before by those who promised care, and that memory still burned. But when she looked at her sister, whose fragile body rested against her, she knew she could not do this alone. The man slowly stood again, adjusting the bag on his shoulder. "I have a fire, a roof, and water," he said. "It's not much, but it's more than this street." He took one step back instead of forward, as if to show her he would not force them. Then he turned slightly, pointing toward a faint glow in the distance, a small light flickering in the dark. "That's my shelter, you can follow or stay," he said quietly. "The choice is yours." The older sister bit her lip, staring at the light, then at him, then at her sister. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She had never been given a choice before, always pushed, always abandoned, always ignored. Now she had to decide, and the weight of it pressed down on her like stone. The younger sister stirred in her arms, whispering weakly, "Please, warm." The word broke her, because it was not about her own fear anymore. It was about her sister's survival. She nodded slowly, her voice soft but firm. "We will follow, but if you try anything, I will fight." The man gave a small nod, almost respectful. "Fair enough," he said. They began to walk, the man leading at a steady pace, keeping distance so they would not feel trapped. The sisters followed, their steps unsteady, the younger leaning against the older's shoulder. The city around them seemed endless, filled with broken walls and empty silence. Yet the faint glow ahead grew brighter with each step, a fragile promise in the darkness. The older sister never stopped watching the man, her every sense alert. But with each step, she noticed something strange. He never rushed them. He never turned suddenly. He never raised his voice. Instead, he moved with patience, as though he understood their fear, as though he had walked this road before. At last, they reached a small shelter built into the remains of a stone wall. Inside, a fire burned softly, casting light that warmed the cold air. The man stepped aside, letting them enter first. The older sister hesitated at the doorway, her instinct screaming to run, but her sister's trembling hand pulled her forward. They stepped inside, and for the first time in many nights, warmth touched their frozen skin. The man set down his bag in the corner, then moved closer to the fire, keeping his back turned to them. He spoke gently. "Sit near the flames. Let her rest." The older girl guided her sister down carefully, wrapping her arms around her. The warmth wrapped them like a blanket, easing the pain in their bones. The younger sister closed her eyes and whispered, "It feels safe." Before drifting into a fragile sleep, the older one stayed awake, her eyes still fixed on the human. Her fear was not gone, but something else stirred in her chest now. Something she had not felt in a long time. It was not trust, not yet, but the first spark of it. And in that quiet shelter with the fire crackling, she wondered if this stranger was the answer she had been praying for. The fire crackled softly inside the small shelter, its glow pushing back the cold shadows. The two alien sisters sat close together, their thin hands wrapped around each other, as if afraid the world would tear them apart again. The younger sister lay with her head resting on the older's lap, her breathing slow but steadier than before. Her cheeks, pale from hunger and cold, now carried a faint blush from the warmth. The older sister stared at the human who had brought them here, her eyes sharp and filled with doubt. He sat near the fire, his back against the wall, his face lit by the flames. He did not speak, did not press them with questions. He only poked the fire with a piece of wood. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the crackle of burning wood and the faint whistling of the wind outside. The older girl's mind was a storm. Why? Was he helping? What did he want? Could this warmth be nothing but a trap? But when she looked down at her sister, who finally slept without shivering, her heart softened, even if danger lurked. For this one night her sister was safe, and that mattered more than anything else. After some time, the man opened his bag and pulled out a small pot and a bottle of water. He placed the pot over the fire and poured the water in, then dropped in dried herbs and grains. The smell slowly spread through the shelter, rich and warm, making the older girl's stomach twist in hunger. Her eyes followed the pot, her body tense, but her hunger was stronger than her suspicion. "You both need food," the man said quietly, his voice calm. He stirred the pot gently, the steam rising around him. "I don't know your names, but I know you're starving," he added, without looking at them. The older sister did not answer, her lips pressed tight. She thought about lying, about hiding their names, but silence felt safer, so she only whispered, "She needs food more than me," nodding to her sleeping sister. The man gave a small nod as if agreeing. "Then she will eat first," he said. When the stew was ready, he poured it into a small wooden bowl and set it down on the ground, pushing it gently toward them. The smell filled the shelter, warm and alive, carrying hope with it. The older sister reached slowly, her hands trembling. She lifted the bowl, spooned a little, and carefully pressed it to her sister's lips. The younger girl stirred, opening her eyes halfway, her lips parted. Tasting the warm liquid, and a weak smile appeared on her face. "It's good," she whispered, her voice thin as thread, before taking another sip. Tears filled the older sister's eyes as she watched life slowly return to her sibling. Every spoon felt like a gift, every swallow like a miracle. The human said nothing as he watched, only letting them eat in peace. When the younger sister could eat no more, the older one finished the bowl herself, though she took only small sips. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she forced herself to eat slowly, afraid it might vanish if she rushed. The warmth spread through her body, chasing away the chill that had lived in her bones for days. After they finished, the man took the empty bowl back, cleaned it with a cloth, and set it aside. Then he leaned, back against the wall, his eyes half closed as though the fire and silence were enough. The older sister studied him, searching again for signs of danger, but he looked too tired to be cruel, too quiet to be planning tricks. "Why do you wander here?" she finally asked, her voice sharp but curious. The man opened his eyes slowly, meeting her gaze. "I travel because I lost my home," he said, his tone heavy but honest. "I know what it means to be left with nothing," he added, looking at the flames instead of her. His words struck her like cold rain, because they felt too close to her own pain. She looked down at her sister, who now slept more peacefully. Maybe fate had brought them to someone who understood, maybe not, but for the first time in years she did not feel entirely invisible. The night deepened outside, and the wind howled against the walls of the shelter. Inside, the fire glowed brighter, wrapping them in a fragile cocoon of warmth. The older sister leaned back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at her eyes. Her body fought to stay awake, to keep guard, but her heavy eyelids betrayed her. Before sleep claimed her, she whispered, a promise to herself, "If this is a trick, I will fight, but if it is real, maybe we are not alone anymore." Her sister's soft breathing was like music, a reminder that life still clung to them. The human closed his eyes too, resting in silence, the fire between them glowing like hope. And in that small shelter, on a night that began with despair, the first warmth of trust was born. The morning came slowly, the light of dawn slipping through cracks in the ruined walls. The fire in the shelter had burned low, but its faint glow still warmed the air. The older alien sister opened her eyes, her body stiff from sleeping against the stone floor. For a moment she felt peace, hearing the steady breathing of her younger sister, who slept soundly beside her. But then she remembered where they were, and her heart tightened again. Her eyes darted to the corner where the human sat with his back against the wall, his head bowed in sleep. His hand rested near a small knife on his belt, and the sight made her blood run cold. She held her breath, staring at him, wondering if this was the moment his kindness would turn into danger. Fear crept back into her chest like an old enemy. What if he only saved them to use them? What if the food and warmth came with a hidden price? Her mind raced with memories of the past, of voices that once promised safety but ended with betrayal. She remembered doors slammed in their faces, harsh laughter, and hands that shoved them into the dirt. She remembered the moment their guardians abandoned them in the streets, walking away without a second glance. The younger sister stirred in her sleep, whispering softly, "Warm, safe." The words pierced the older one's heart, because she wanted to believe them, but her fear would not let her rest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the human, who shifted slightly in his sleep. His knife still at his side, she imagined what would happen if he opened his eyes and turned on them. Her fists clenched, her body ready to shield her sister even if it meant her own end. When the man finally stirred awake, the girl's heart pounded fast. He stretched slowly, his movements heavy with weariness, and rubbed his eyes. Noticing her gaze, he raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "You were awake before me," he said softly, his voice still heavy with sleep. "I thought you'd run in. The night," he added, but there was no anger in his tone, only quiet honesty. The girl did not answer, she only hugged her sister closer. The human stood, adjusting his jacket and bag, then poured water into the pot to heat it again. The older sister finally spoke, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Why do you keep helping us?" The man looked at her for a long moment before replying, "Because I don't want you to carry the same scars I carry." His words confused her, but also stirred something inside her, something she tried hard to ignore. Breakfast was quiet, the man giving them more of his dried food. The younger sister ate eagerly, her small hands shaking with hunger, but her eyes brightening with every bite. The older one only nibbled, her mind too heavy to enjoy the taste. She studied the man, waiting for signs of cruelty. But instead she saw patience. He never forced them to talk, never demanded anything in return. Still, the shadows of fear whispered in her heart, reminding her that kindness often had a hidden blade. Later, the man stepped outside to gather wood, leaving the sisters inside the shelter. The older one turned to her sister, her voice low and urgent. "We cannot trust him fully, not yet." The younger tilted her head, her eyes soft. "But he gave us food and warmth, and he didn't hurt us." The older sister shook her head. "That doesn't mean he won't. We must be ready." Her words were firm, but her heart ached when she saw her sister's hopeful expression dim. When the human returned, carrying a bundle of sticks, the younger girl greeted him with a small smile. He smiled back faintly, setting the wood down near the fire. The older one watched the exchange with mixed feelings, torn between fear and the longing for safety. Her heart wanted to trust, but her scars whispered warnings she could not silence. That night, as the fire burned once again, the human spoke, his eyes fixed on the flames. "I lost my family long ago," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of old pain. "No one helped us, no one cared, and I swore if I ever saw someone else in that place, I would not turn away." His words filled the shelter like a heavy wind, and for a moment, silence followed. The younger sister's eyes glistened with tears while the older one looked down, fighting the storm inside her chest. Could she believe him? Could she allow herself to think that maybe this man was different? Or was this another story meant to lower her guard before the blade fell? The fire crackled, the shadows danced on the walls, and the girl's heart remained trapped between fear and hope. As the night grew deeper, she lay awake while her sister slept peacefully. Her eyes stayed on the human, who sat quietly near the fire, his expression unreadable. Every beat of her heart reminded her of the danger, but also of the warmth that kept them alive, and in the stillness of that night, she realized that her greatest battle was not with the human, but with her own fear. The fire burned lower that night, its glow softer than before. The shelter was quiet, except for the faint breathing of the younger alien girl, who slept wrapped in a thin blanket the human had given. The older sister sat awake, her arms folded around her knees, her eyes fixed on the man sitting across the fire. The shadows flickered on his face, sometimes gentle, sometimes hard, and her heart could not decide which one was real. She had lived too long with betrayal to believe easily. Her thoughts returned again and again to the same question. Why would a human help two abandoned alien girls? She feared that every kindness came with a hidden chain, every smile hiding a blade. But when she looked at her sister, resting peacefully, for the first time in weeks her doubts felt cruel. Her sister's cheeks carried color again, her lips no longer dry, her body no longer shaking with cold, and she could not deny this was because of him. The human leaned back against the wall, his eyes half closed, but he spoke softly. "You don't trust me," he said, his voice calm, as if he had read her mind. The older girl stiffened, gripping her knees tighter. "I don't trust anyone," she whispered. The man nodded slowly, staring into the flames. "Then you're wiser than most," he said. "Trust is dangerous." His words surprised her because they sounded more like agreement than complaint. He turned his gaze toward her sister, then back to the fire. "You have someone to protect that makes you strong, but also afraid," he said. The girl frowned, not knowing how to answer because his words were true. Silence filled the shelter again, broken only by the crackle of the firewood. The older sister's mind wrestled with itself, torn between fear and the faint glow of hope. The next morning, the man packed his bag, tying it with rough rope. He glanced at the girls and said, "I will move soon. This city is not safe." The words sent a shiver through the older one, because she knew he was right. The city streets were filled with dangers, bandits, soldiers, and hunger itself. Staying here meant death, but leaving meant depending on him. He looked at her directly, his eyes serious. "You can come with me or stay, it's your choice." The weight of his words fell heavy on her chest. She had not been given choices before, only forced into misery, abandoned without warning. Now freedom felt frightening, like standing on the edge of a cliff with no clear path. The younger sister stirred, opening her eyes with a weak smile. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, her voice small but filled with hope. The older girl did not answer, her heart caught in conflict. If they followed him, he could betray them, but if they stayed, her sister might not survive another week. Her eyes burned as she thought of the past, of how many times she had promised to protect her. This was another moment where her decision would decide life or death. The human crouched near the fire, speaking quietly. "I won't force you. If you stay, I'll leave you enough food for some days, but after that, you'll be alone again." The older girl's hands shook, her throat dry because she could not ignore the truth. She wanted to scream at him, to demand why he cared, but her voice failed. Her younger sister looked at her, her eyes wide and pleading. "I don't want to be alone anymore." Those words broke the wall around her heart. All her doubts, all her fear, they still lived inside her, but her sister's voice was stronger. She realized then that trust was not about safety. It was about choosing hope over despair. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, and when she opened them again, her voice trembled, but was steady. "We will come with you," she said, her arms tightening around her sister. The human did not smile, he only gave a firm nod as though he respected the weight of her decision. "Then we move together," he said simply. He packed the last of his things, tied his cloak tighter, and stepped toward the door. The sisters rose slowly, the younger leaning against the older for support. The cold air rushed in as the door opened, the street outside filled with fog and silence. As they stepped out, the older girl felt fear still gnawing at her, but also something else. It was small, fragile, but real hope. Her heart whispered that danger might still come, but at least they would not face it alone. For the first time, the choice was hers, and she had chosen not to give up. The three figures walked into the morning mist, their shadows long on the broken street. Behind them, the small fire burned out, but ahead, a path unknown waited. The older sister held her sister's hand tightly, her eyes fixed forward, and though fear followed them like a shadow, a new bond had begun to grow, born, not from blood but from choice. The road beyond the city was rough and broken, covered with stones and cracked earth. The human walked ahead with steady steps, carrying his bag on his back, while the two alien sisters followed close behind. The younger sister leaned often on the older one's arm, her strength not yet fully returned, but her eyes were brighter. Now the cold wind cut against their faces, yet the warmth of hope kept them moving forward. For the first time in many days, they were not wandering without direction. There was someone leading the way, someone who seemed to know where he was going. The older sister's heart remained cautious, fear whispering that this could still end in betrayal, but she could not deny what she saw. The man slowed his pace to match theirs, and when her sister stumbled, he waited patiently. He never shouted, never forced them. He simply walked with quiet strength. By the second night, they reached a small stream hidden between the hills. The human built a fire while the sisters sat by the water, washing their faces and drinking slowly. The younger girl laughed for the first time in weeks as the cold water splashed against her skin. The sound startled the older one, but it also filled her with a strange warmth she had almost forgotten. The human glanced at them, his face calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. It was not pity, not pride, but something gentler, like seeing a fragile flower bloom in winter. He set the pot over the fire again, cooking what little food he had left. When he served it, he made sure the younger sister had the largest share. Giving himself the smallest portion, the older girl noticed her suspicions softening against her will. Days turned into a rhythm, walking by day, resting by night. The human taught them simple things, how to build a fire quickly, how to find berries that were safe to eat, how to wrap cloth to keep warm. The younger sister listened eagerly, her eyes shining as if every word was treasure. The older one watched carefully, memorizing his actions, testing his patience with sharp questions, but he never pushed back. Instead, he answered with honesty, even when the answers were heavy with sorrow. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky with orange light, the three of them sat together by the fire. The younger sister rested her head on her sibling's shoulder, her voice soft as she said, It feels like home. The words struck the older one like lightning, her chest tightening as she looked at the firelight dancing on her sister's face. A home. Something they had not known for so long. Something she thought they would never have again. The human, hearing her words, looked into the flames for a long time, then said quietly, "Family is not always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stay." The older sister's heart skipped, his words heavy with meaning. She wanted to reject them, to keep her guard high, but the warmth around the fire was undeniable. Her sister's small hand held hers tightly, as if begging her to believe. And, in that moment, she felt the bond between them stretch toward something new. The days grew colder as they climbed into the hills, snow dusting the ground in thin layers. The human gave the girls his cloak, wrapping it around both of them, leaving himself exposed to the wind. The older sister saw his shoulders shake in the cold, yet he never complained. Her suspicion wrestled with gratitude, and slowly, gratitude began to win. That night, while the younger one slept, the older sister whispered to him across the fire. "Why do you call us family?" she asked, her voice low but steady. The man looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight, and after a pause he said, "Because I see in you what I once lost, and because I don't want you to feel abandoned again." The words broke the walls she had built, not completely, but enough for tears to well in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, turning her face so he would not see. The next morning, the younger sister awoke with more strength, her laughter filling the cold air. She played with the snow, tossing it in the air and smiling at the flakes that landed on her hair. The human laughed softly too, a sound rare but genuine. And for the first time, the older sister did not see him as a stranger, but as something closer, something safer. The bond that had started with bread and fire was now stronger, woven with care, sacrifice, and trust. The older sister still carried fear, but she also carried hope. Her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, they had found what they had been searching for, not just survival, not just shelter, but the beginnings of a family. The journey through the hills grew harder each day, but the bond between the three grew stronger. The human always walked ahead, clearing the path, while the sisters followed close behind. The younger one's steps were steadier now, her eyes brighter, her laughter returning like sunshine breaking through clouds. The older sister still carried fear in her heart, but she could not ignore the warmth that had taken root in their lives. One morning, as the sun rose over the snowy peaks, the human stopped at the top of a ridge. He pointed toward the horizon where a small village rested in the valley below, smoke rising gently from chimneys. "That's where we're going," he said, his voice calm but hopeful. The sisters looked at the village with wide eyes, their hearts pounding. They had not seen a place like that in years, not since before their abandonment, but fear quickly returned to the older sister. "What if they don't want us?" she whispered, her arms tightening around her younger sibling. "What if they send us away like before?" The human turned to her, his eyes steady. "If they do, then we move on together, but you will not be alone again." His words carried weight, a promise that felt stronger than the cold wind biting at their faces. When they reached the village, the people stared at them with cautious eyes. Whispers followed their steps, the sight of two alien girls walking beside a human stirring curiosity and suspicion. The older sister felt her body tense, ready to pull her sibling away. But the human walked calmly, his head high. He led them to a small house at the edge of the village, an old cabin with smoke rising from its chimney. "This was my home once," he said softly, his voice carrying both pain and hope. Inside, the cabin was simple. Wooden walls, a stone hearth, a table, and two small beds covered in old blankets. The sisters looked around with wide eyes, their hands brushing over the blankets as if afraid they might vanish. The younger sister whispered, "It feels warm." And for the first time, she smiled without fear. The older one's heart ached as she watched, because she had not seen her sister look like this in so long. The human lit the fire, and soon the cabin filled with warmth and light. He turned to the sisters, his expression serious but gentle. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You don't have to stay. But if you want, this can be your home too." The older sister's breath caught, the words hitting her harder than she expected. No one had ever offered them a choice. No one had ever said they could belong. Her mind screamed with doubt. Could she really believe this? Could she trust him fully? But when she looked at her sister, who had already curled into one of the beds with a peaceful smile, the answer became clear. She stepped closer to the fire, her voice trembling but firm. "We will stay." The human nodded once, his eyes softening. "Then from this day you are not just guests. You are family." The word family echoed in her chest, warming a place inside her that had been cold for years. Her hands shook. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not look away. Her sister sat up, her small voice full of joy. "We have a family again." The older girl hugged her tightly, her tears falling freely now. For the first time, they were not just surviving. They were living. Days passed, and the cabin became alive with laughter and warmth. The human taught the sisters how to cook, how to mend clothes, how to keep the fire burning through the night. The younger one ran through the snow outside, her laughter echoing against the hills. The older one worked beside the human, her heart slowly learning that trust could grow. Every meal shared, every story told by the fire, wove their bond tighter, stronger, unbreakable. The older sister still had moments of fear, when shadows of the past whispered to her. But each time the human's steady presence and her sister's bright smile pushed those fears away. She realized that family was not only blood, it was love, sacrifice, and the choice to stay together. She no longer felt abandoned, no longer felt invisible. She had someone to lean on, someone who had chosen them when the world had turned away. One evening, as the fire crackled and the snow fell outside, the human looked at the sisters and said, "You are not alone anymore. Not yesterday, not today, not tomorrow." The younger girl clapped her hands with joy while the older one lowered her head, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Her voice was soft but strong as she whispered, "Thank you." And those two words carried all the weight of her pain, her hope, and her acceptance. The story that began on an empty street with hunger and despair now ended in a cabin filled with warmth and love. Two abandoned alien girls had found not just shelter but a family. And it was all because one human chose kindness instead of cruelty. The darkness of the past still lingered, but the light of their new bond shone brighter. And together, they stepped into a new beginning, no longer lost, no longer abandoned, but truly home.